What makes a novel count as literary fiction? How is it different from upmarket fiction? And are they both better than commercial fiction? What makes them different? It took me years to develop the views I'm going to share with you today. I want to talk about how I understand these categories and why I think upmarket fiction is your sweet spot as a novelist. Let's go. For a really long time, I didn't quite understand what literary fiction meant, honestly. It seemed like this kind of big scary term that I was supposed to aspire to as an author. It was the kind of fiction that won awards, that got reviewed in prestigious publications and made you seem really smart when you went to your college reunion. So of course I wanted to write it. The only problem, which was a big problem, was that when I actually read books that were clearly categorized as literary fiction, I often felt kind of underwhelmed. It's not that I thought they were bad. They just didn't seem any better or more enjoyable than the more commercial books that I loved. I couldn't understand why some books were considered more impressive just because they didn't seem to have a strong plot. Like, wasn't plot an important part of storytelling? I also couldn't help but wonder why books had to even be classified as literary or commercial. Like, why couldn't a book have a great plot and great character development and impressive prose? To try to make sense of this, I started doing my own research. I read a lot of novels in different genres and categories to see how they were categorized and why. And I came up with my theory, which I'll share with you now. First, you have to understand that genres are marketing categories. They exist to sell your book. This is not a science. Your book's genre is an art. It is a marketing art. Jodi Picoult's books, for example, are categorized as women's fiction. Why? Because that's how booksellers have decided to sell Jodi Picoult's books. Here's a quote I actually really like to share from Jodi about her novel, The Storyteller. She said, "I've heard The Storyteller described as chick lit, which is hilarious to me. There's nothing wrong at all with chick lit, but it tends to be lighthearted and comedic, and there's nothing in my novel that qualifies. It's about the Holocaust, for God's sake, and that is not exactly a fluffy topic." Okay, now because genre is a marketing category, books can and often be categorized in more than one genre, okay? Like a book can be literary fiction and a mystery, or a literary fiction mystery. That's also commercial. It can be sci-fi. That's also women's fiction. My books tend to be classified as contemporary fiction or upmarket fiction, more on that in a moment, but also sometimes women's fiction for the mere fact that I'm a woman author, which is basically what Jodi Picoult was saying in that quote a moment ago. We aren't talking about women's fiction today, though. That's its own topic. So those are three important things to understand off the bat. 1, genre is a marketing category. 2, marketing departments will choose whatever categories are most likely to sell the book. And 3, this means your book will probably fall into a few of those categories. Now that we've established those 3 principles, let's talk about the difference between literary and commercial fiction. When a book is categorized as commercial fiction, that just means that the publisher thinks it's possible for it to sell a lot of copies because it has a good plot, and a good plot keeps people turning the pages. Commercial just means we think it could sell a lot of copies. These books can also be character-driven, and they can have prose that in itself feels pleasurable to read because it's original, or it has unique details or other features that, make writing itself feel special. But to be called commercial essentially means it has a good plot, okay? Because that's what sells a lot of copies. So there is your very basic definition of commercial fiction. Commercial fiction equals good plot. Now, if a book is described as literary, it tends to have complex characters that don't merely follow tropes. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's not really a literary fiction thing. It also tends to contain prose that is notable for its original or sparse style or unique details that make the writing feel special. In other words, the prose isn't merely in service of the story. The prose is a feature of the book unto itself. Its goal isn't just to be readable. It also attempts to shine kind of on a more micro level. You may be thinking, those things don't seem mutually exclusive, writing like that and good plot. And you're right, they're absolutely not. If a book is literary and commercial, it's called upmarket. And that means It checks the boxes of both literary and commercial, or at least most of them. Which brings me to my point, why I think upmarket is the sweet spot of fiction. When I'm writing and when I'm teaching novel writing, I really think that the sweet spot to aspire to is upmarket fiction. That's what I try to write and what I teach other writers to write. You want to write your best possible book, but you also want to sell copies. And to me, that makes upmarket the sweet spot. So, my suggestion for new novelists who aren't quite sure where they want their entry point to be: aspire to write upmarket fiction. It has commercial appeal, meaning a good plot, but it also investigates character deeply enough and has sufficiently original prose to be considered literary. And this is why upmarket fiction is what I like to teach. Speaking of writing, are you writing a book or do you want to write a book? Because if so, I would love to hear from you. When I'm not writing, my mission is to help writers write their dream books. I love it. And if you're curious to know more, I have a video walking you through my 4 notebooks method for writing a novel. You can get that video along with my free template for using the 4 notebooks method to write your novel by applying to my program, the Book Incubator, at the link below. It's a 12-month MFA alternative, and the application is just 2 questions. I just ask you to tell me a little bit about you and your book or your book idea. It'll take you less than 5 minutes. So go to the link below or go to thebookincubator.com. I really hope to hear from you.